Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of React Native Radio. This week, I'm Charles Max Wood. I'm filling in for Nader Dabit, and we are talking to Michael. Oh, boy, I should have asked you how to say your last name, huh?
It's just Michał or Michael. It's Michał Pierzchała, to be exact.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, clearly.
Infinite Red is a US-based consultancy specializing in React and React Native. They do mobile app and web design and development. They are deeply involved in the React and React Native open source communities, publish the React Native newsletter with 10,000 subscribers, and are involved with the React Native core development. If you have a project and need design or engineering help from an experienced team to take it all the way from concept to completion, get in touch with Infinite Red. Also, check out Chain React, the React Native conference, which is hosted by Infinite Red in July in Portland with 500 developers from all around the world. You can find them at infinite.red. Make sure to mention you heard about them in this ad.
So, do you want to give us a brief introduction, who you are, where you work, why you're famous, all that stuff, and then we can dive in and talk about React Native testing library?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I don't think I'm famous, but I work at CallStack. So CallStack is a consulting agency, mainly interested in React Native and some other cross-platform technologies. So on a day-to-day basis, I do React Native apps. I help solving some problems, integrate React Native into bigger organizations, or just building apps or introducing some teams to it. And apart from that, I also contribute to a bunch of open source projects. So I started with Jest and React, so back in the days in 2016 probably. And it turns out that I really liked contributing to Jest. So I became a core maintainer, and I'm there to this day. But right now my focus shifted to React Native a bit. I want to go back to Jest as well, fix some stuff. But right now it's unfortunately or fortunately the React Native. So while working for one of our clients, there was a need to introduce some testing, and there was actually we had some Enzyme tests, and we had troubles on they were not really reliable. They broke all the time when we refactored stuff, etc. So we thought maybe there was a better abstraction, or better library to solve the problem. So unfortunately there wasn't. So we tried to come up with our own helpers, and those helpers came out to be React Native testing library.
Okay.
And it seems to be working to this day. We have some plans for it, but for now, I want to say it's pretty stable, but we're gonna deprecate some stuff. So let's leave that for later. And apart from that, I'm quite active in the React Native CLI project. So we try really hard to improve the developer experience for all React Native developers out there. And it comes to initiating the project, upgrading, running commands fast, having some helpful messages here and there. Just some maintenance and development. And
that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's it about me.
So I'm curious. I mean, let's just dive in, because you talked a bit about React Native testing library, and then we can probably loop back around to the React Native CLI. So is React Native testing library then based on Enzyme, or did you build your own engine underneath it?
No. It's like a replacement for Enzyme.
Okay.
And it's built on top of the React test renderer. And I was when I was designing the library, I had this React testing library in mind, but it turned out that I made some some mistakes by introducing a couple of let's say dangerous APIs. Like it's a questionable thing, but they're not all of them are in the spirit of the React testing library project. So in the version 2 of library, we try to be as compliant to those guiding principles as possible, and of course we'll need to prepare some transition packages like helpers for those that want to upgrade. But basically, we introduced those let's say bad APIs because we wanted to migrate off Enzyme as easily as possible, and that wasn't like the best idea because we really were able to convert some of the tests pretty easily, but then we had similar issues as we had with Enzyme. Less, but some of them were still prevalent. So that's why we want to like remove some of the dangerous APIs. Let's name them this way.
That makes sense. I mean, I've seen a few projects like this that kind of go that way where, yeah, initially you have things in there that sort of look or feel like whatever you're moving from. And then, yeah, as you kind of get the flavor of where you want to end up, you wind up, okay, we're going to deprecate some of this because it's not in line with where we're actually heading anymore. Yeah.
So that was a real lesson for me in terms of designing APIs and the whole interface look and feel for the library, even so small as this one, because it's really small set of helpers. So in terms of React Native, this library, the React Native testing library, is in fact a convenience wrapper around React test render. So we're rendering to Node to the, like we're using like emulated environment for React components. So it's not like a general purpose testing library. It's just for React, specifically React Native right now. But we would like to make this library compatible with any React target, because that's definitely possible since we are abstraction over the React test render. Right. So, I mean, what are the major differences? Like if I'm building a React Native app and I'm looking at Enzyme and I'm looking at a React Native testing library, what are the trade-offs there? What are the differences between the library that are going to impact me? Because a lot of this under the hood stuff, I probably don't care unless it just is messy one way or the other. Yeah, so Enzyme also uses React test render under the hood. It just creates its own abstraction over the testing wrapper, and they have like different wrappers for different kind of testing helpers. So we can render a React component in a shallow way, which is re-rendering only the children, and like don't do a deep rendering, just show me the first render and bail on other ones. And you can do a deep render, and here's the first issue with Enzyme. If you wanna do deep rendering, you need to use JS DOM environment. So you're basically emulating browser environment for testing React Native, which is not optimal in my opinion, and because React Native is basically not running in a browser. It's a different environment. It's very similar, but it's different. Like the event system is different. And yeah, I'll probably tell about event system later, because there are some caveats in the library and some trade-offs we made. And there are some React projects that we also help. Like we're looking forward to have them implemented and to have them actually succeed because they are in the testing period. So yeah, going back to the changes, to the differences, is that a lot of, like, a majority of testing materials and even documentation of Enzyme encourages shallow testing, which is like a way to unit test your components, and it comes with a bunch of trade-offs. So it's definitely a lot faster than rendering like whole React hierarchy, all the components, all the children and their children and their children of your tested component. But you actually lose a lot of code that is not actually being executed. It's kind of mocked. Also, in shallow rendering, you get a different set of lifecycle events that React runs. So it doesn't run everything. You have to create some weird hacks to trigger some events. There are even APIs that allow you to do it. So this may tell you that this shallow wrapper is not like a best idea to test React components. It may be handy in some cases if you really if you're really into unit testing and then integration testing those units. But in my experience and with the teams I was working on, it's really like testing is really about confidence. So it's better to have all those things tested in a like full integration way. So the other thing that Enzyme is different is that it kind of encourages to test implementation details. There are APIs to schedule like a state update or props update of the React components that are just impossible to do from the user perspective. They're just emulated for the testing purposes. And that's really bad because developers end up testing some internal state that may change in the future. And a nice example of how this may affect your code and actually your ability to move fast is migration to hooks, for example. So imagine you have a class component and then hooks come out. They're great. They fix some of your problems. They make the code smaller, less prone to errors, etc., etc. So you want to move some of the components or write new ones in this paradigm. So you rewrite some of your class components into hooks, and it turns out that they're gonna break in Enzyme because the support needs to come in. So you need to wait for the version upgrade of Enzyme.
Right, because it has to emulate it instead of actually running it, right?
I mean, they need to update their abstractions.
Right. Okay.
To make it work. And the other thing is that you probably written, if you're like most of the developers out there, if you had some state inside, you just check if the state was changed. And with hooks, you completely rewritten your state. And your tests are basically worthless now. They give you zero confidence, they're breaking, and if you really want to refactor this properly, you need to first change your test to not test implementation details of your component, and then rewrite it to hooks or to anything else. So this is and of course you can write tests that are not like dealing with internals of React or your React components in Enzyme, but it's harder to do it, and and it's just more common to find examples of doing it bad way. So I'm not saying that Enzyme is, let's say, bad library, or you cannot do or you cannot write good tests in it. Of course you can, but it's harder, and
the tests are more brittle.
Yeah. I wanted to actually say something else, but maybe I'll it will come back to me later.
Yeah. So are there any downsides to the way that you do it in React Native testing library, where you're actually able to do those subcomponent rendering and, have all that together that way? It sounds like there are plenty of upsides, but yeah, is there a dark side to that, or any hacks you have to put together to work?
Of course there is, because if you render deeply, you are always, and if you just like a component that consists of other components, you're basically always writing integration tests, and you don't really care about those components, only what they render. So you end up with a bit slower tests, but that's not like they're not super slow, but definitely slower than the shallow ones. And you cannot like grab some kind of component because there is a component there. You need to know what this component renders. So if there's a button and this button renders a text and a label, for example, what you can do with the React Native testing library is to find this very text or this very label based on their text query or accessibility query, for example. So this is another thing that the React Native testing library is encouraging. It's promoting accessibility, because if you think you cannot find certain component, so you, for example, add this test ID or so, right? You do it in like in Selenium or Appium or stuff like this to actually locate certain element. But what happens is that your users cannot see test IDs, but they can see accessibility elements, especially if they're using a voiceover or talkback or other screen reader. So by doing so, by making this API a bit less permissive, we actually we try to promote some good practices, and we were very opinionated in this topic. So I've already seen examples of tests that were actually like my friends on CallStack. They always come back to me with questions about testing and testing with this library, and they say, "Oh, I have this issue. I cannot find this component. Like, I need to give it a test ID, or I need to grab it by some reference or so." And then I just ask them, "Hey, what's this component is about? Like, what the user sees?" And then it usually clicks. Maybe not after first time, but it definitely helps writing more accessible components. And this was the second thing that I wanted to say about Enzyme API. It's just too permissive. It allows you to do too much than necessary to write good tests. So by making this API smaller, we make it a bit harder at first, at least, to write a test. But then it kind of becomes natural for you to write tests in a way that actually user would do would use your feature or screen or anything.
So then which of these attributes, because you said that you can work off of even like accessibility labels and stuff like that, which of these attributes do you tend to work off of then? Do you write tests for accessibility using the accessibility labels and then write other tests using the IDs or whatever of the components?
So it depends. Like for new like in new tests, because this is like accessibility queries are a feature that we introduced, I think something a month ago. And for new tests, I try to always grab items by accessibility and then test if they render some regular text by the way, or because this is actually important when you deal with images or like icons, etc. They are actually not. There's no text there. A user can see a image or an icon, but if they're on a screen reader, for example, they cannot tell what kind of image is that unless you tell them that, hey, this is there's a label that say, hey, this is a cat image and this is a dog image. So it's about that. So if we cannot grab element in a different way, we do it with accessibility helpers.
Okay. I mean, how do you pull it into a project? Do you just npm install it, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, it's a regular library. It has a peer dependency on React and React render, and that's it. You just pull it into your library, and there are like four or five methods exported from the library, and the most important is render, and it works this way that you pass your component definition or React element into the render function, and then it returns a set of queries that you can do on the rendered output. So one of the queries like get by text or get all by accessibility label, or get by test ID, so stuff like that. So inside this component, you can search for something, and that's the idea behind it. You render and you search something inside. You can also re-render this component to simulate like if it was re-render. But you actually don't need this API. You can wrap it in like a parent component that would do it for you, but it's just a convenience helper.
Nice. So I want to kind of roll back to Jest for a minute since we're talking about testing. So you mentioned that you've been on the Jest team, but you're kind of focused on React Native testing library at the moment. I'm a little bit curious, does Jest not work on React Native, or were there other reasons why you didn't adapt Jest to do what you wanted?
So Jest is a testing framework, like a test runner, and React Native testing library is a library helper for your tests. So we usually use React Native testing library inside the Jest test. And Jest works pretty well with React Native, but it's there is a thing that a lot of React Native components need to be mocked because there are those native functionalities that cannot transfer to JavaScript. So you need to somehow mock it. And React Native comes with a default Jest preset for testing. And it comes with a bunch of mocks, but they're, let's say, not high quality. They're just to fill some gaps and to be there. And in fact, you need to mock a lot of those native APIs by yourself. And but there is this Lean Core initiative in React Native community. That the core React Native is getting smaller, and if you want to add some functionalities like check for the net information, like network information, or use a toast on Android, or a picker, or some kind of other APIs, you actually are expected to import them outside of React Native, like from the community library. So there is this React Native community GitHub that gathers a lot of packages that are being extracted out of React Native.
Okay.
And I've already seen a bunch of packages adopting like really high quality mocks for testing. So that's one of the benefits of Linkcore is that those libraries get proper maintenance, and we were able to easily ship better mocks for Jest, for example.
Right. This episode is brought to you by TripleByte. Applying to programming jobs sucks. You have to put the right keywords in your resume, you spend hours and hours on the phone screens and take-home projects, and that's assuming the company even responds to your application. Well, if you're a software engineer, TripleByte can help. They work with over 400 top tech companies, from big names like Dropbox and Adobe to exciting startups. You do one brief online interview with them, and if you do well, you go straight to final interviews with the company on their platform. It's like the common app for software developers. TripleByte does not look at your resume or where you went to school. All they care about is if you can code. I've helped dozens of software developers with various credentials get jobs, and this looks like a terrific way for you to get in and get interviewed and get a job without a lot of the hassle and overhead. You can go check them out at triplebyte.com/reactradio. That's triplebyte.com, byte as in 8 bits. As a special offer for listeners of this show, if you take a job through TripleByte, they'll offer you a $1,000 signing bonus. So what do you do for the Jest team then?
Currently it's a maintenance, let's say. So I try to be up to date with what's going on in the repository. I read all the mails, try to respond to issues, triage some of them, review pull requests, fix some smaller functionalities, or provide some newer ones, and also like we the Jest core team gathers like around once a year to discuss the current issues with the framework and some future directions. So we had this meeting alongside with React Native Summit this year in March, so that's what I do. I just try to be up to date and be responsive to the issues and pull requests.
I gotcha. Now, one thing I'm also curious about, because it sounds like you've spent a significant amount of time working on this open source project, but CallStack is a consultancy. So how much time do you spend working on client work versus open source work?
Oh, it really depends. It really depends on the project, but it's always that client is first. So let's say by default it's 100% time devoted to client development, but it happens pretty often that clients are interested in fixing some issues with third-party React Native libraries, or with something inside React Native, or some other libraries, and then they just allow us to work in the open source to fix their problems. It also happens that there are gaps between when we switch projects or wait for some permissions. Like, it all depends on the project, but there are ones that getting up to speed with the client's environment takes a bunch of days. So in this time we try to either improve some internal tooling or guides for newcomers or stuff like that, or just work on open source related to React Native, or something that we just feel like making us better developers. Because all in all, like, our clients benefit from our expertise in React Native. So any contributions to to any React Native project is basically a net positive for a client.
So the next question I have is, what do you have planned for the future for React Native testing library and for Jest? Actually, I'm curious about both.
So for the testing library, we plan to currently I'm trying to focus on the CLI because we're just before the 060 release to React Native, and there are a bunch of breaking changes that are gonna make people mad, and we try to improve our tooling to make the transition as seamless as possible.
Right.
This is what I'm focusing right now. But like after we settle with the work we're doing right now, I would like to finish the V2 of React Native Testing Library, which is basically removing deprecated APIs, removing dangerous APIs, provides helpers for the upgrade, and think about better event firing abstraction, because right now when you want to emulate some kind of event propagation inside your app, we're doing it in a because event system in React Native differs between platforms, and it's a bit inconsistent. We kind of hack it we use very simple implementation, in fact, but this is not it happens that the event system in the testing environment will behave different than inside the React Native project itself, on the device, and it's either because mocks being written as they are, or the touch system being written as it is right now in a quite convoluted way. So we want to come with something better, something more reliable. But we're not stressing this out because there is a React Flare project that tries to address cross-platform event abstractions in terms of declarative components, and so we actually have high hopes in that project. So it's currently in a testing phase. So React core team tries to figure out the abstractions and how it works internally at Facebook, and they try to iterate on that, and hopefully they'll ship it. And once that's done, we'll be able to come up with fully compatible way of event handling, firing events in React application. And I'm pretty sure we're not even have to do a lot of work, because there is Sunil Pai working on the React test render right now, and he does a lot of good work out there currently. So I would imagine in my dreams, right? I would like that he's gonna implement some of this React Flare handling into the test render. But if not, I'm pretty sure we'll be happy to contribute some of the support and wrap it in our abstractions. So it's actually transparent to the users.
Cool.
And what was the next question?
Well, I was just asking what was coming next in React Native Testing Library and in Jest. So.
And Jest. So we're preparing the V25 release, and it's going to be mainly about dropping support for Node 6, because it's not supported anymore. And this paves the way for some improvements internally, and upgrade some dependencies like JS DOM, which is very outdated currently. So people come up with custom custom testing environments to use the latest JS DOM, because they drop node versions very quickly, and we cannot do that. And we plan, like, one of the biggest thing we wanted to do is overhaul of the configuration. So we sketched some ideas on what we want to achieve, but this is still like ongoing work. So I think there's not much movement since March when I wrote a comment on this issue, but it's definitely going to be there as a part of the V25 release, because the configuration in Jest becomes like very complex, and we actually want to make it as easy as possible. So one of the pain points is that some of the configuration properties are expressed in regexes. Some of them are expressed in globs, and there's no clear distinction between them. So we need to look out the documentation. I do it all the time, but I never remember which one is which. So you can get the idea. This may be problematic. Also, there was a big performance drop in the V24 because we upgraded to the new version of globing library called Micromatch, and we were waiting for them to rewrite it for performance. So they shipped version 4, and we can, but we need to bump the major version to make this happen, because this will break some Windows users. Or so. It's not like very breaking, but you'll probably want to check if your globs are still working correctly, right? And one thing that we like to also introduce is V8 coverage. So right now, if you want to test the coverage of your project, we use a Babel plugin called Enzyme for that, and it obviously comes with some overhead and some unintended behaviors. We need to ship with Babel by default because of that, and with V8 coverage, if it's stable enough, we'll be able to process bigger files, make it run way faster, like 2 to 3 times faster than currently, and not ship with Babel or Babel. Yeah, somewhere in the future, but like probably not this year.
Yep. Nice. Well, let's talk about the React Native CLI here for a minute, and then we'll jump into picks.
So what do you know? What do you want to know about the CLI?
Well, I think the one that I keep hearing about is like create React Native app.
Oh, this is deprecated long ago.
Okay. So what does the React Native CLI do then?
Yeah. So React Native CLI is a tool that ships with React Native. It was recently extracted out of the core during the lean core movement.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a project that allows you to bundle your JavaScript into a single bundle that is understandable by React Native. It lets you, it gives you start command that starts the packager and connects to the app and lets you develop, connecting debugger, hot reloading, stuff like that. It lets you run the iOS project, run Android project from the command line, log some stuff, let me check what's out there. There's a init command that lets you start a new React Native project. There's upgrade command that we recently overhauled. Oh, we also completely rewritten the init command, but yeah, there's this upgrade which we rewritten in the version, like in the last version of like current version of React Native. So it should be more reliable than the previous one, but it still have some rough edges. We try to smooth it out, but we cannot do everything to make the upgrade smoothly because of the way that React Native is architected. But we're doing like a lot of stuff to make this to make the upgrades as painless or less painful as possible, and to do that we came up with auto linking, and because there's a famous link command, so whenever you install a JavaScript dependency that is actually a React Native module, like for example you want to install React Native WebView, and it has a bunch of native code on iOS and Android now, and to make it work inside your React Native application, you need to tell your native environment, like Xcode or Gradle, where are the header files, where are the like sources, library files, etc. So there is a command called link, and you can run it, and hopefully it will work. But in a lot of cases it doesn't. Because it works in a very brittle way, especially on iOS. So what we came up with is auto linking. It's like a completely different approach that changes a lot and makes it super easy to add native dependencies and super easy to upgrade, because with automatic linking we're not editing any native files. While with regular link, you'd have a bunch of changes in your Gradle configuration for Android, in your Xcode for iOS, and those changes that pile up are actually making the upgrade harder, because especially on Xcode.
Right.
There's also unlink, so we can unlink the library. There's install and uninstall. Like before I joined the React Native CLI team, I didn't know about like half of those commands because there was no documentation. So one of the things we did is we actually written documentation for this project. We written some end-to-end tests,
mm-hmm.
So that it's harder for us to break stuff. But it's still like not every command is covered. But we are slowly working on that. So yeah, there is install and uninstall, and what it does, it installs your dependencies with your package manager. Currently yarn or npm are supported, and then it performs linking. So from React Native 60, those commands will be basically obsolete. But we have some ideas on how to make them useful, and how they can make you install dependencies running a single command, because on iOS, you still need to install your CocoaPods, because another big breaking change is that React Native migrates to like a default template for React Native. That's an important distinction. Migrates to the CocoaPods project. Mm-hmm. So now you're not in the Xcode project, you're in an Xcode workspace. That's also gonna cause a lot of headaches in the community. So I'm really looking forward to all those reactions on what's happened, like on the upgrade path to the React Native 060. But those are the changes that just like most of them are changes that need to happen and will make our lives better in the future versions. So just bear with us. Yeah, other than that, there's nothing really, like not much more. There's a config command that is only used internally, but by our tooling. So this is how, like, this is a command that auto linking is using, and there's like info. It's helpful when sending the bug reports, and we want to know what environment our users use, right?
Nice. All right. Well, I'm pretty much at the end of the time that I have, so let's go ahead and do some picks. First of all, before we do that, how do people find you online and see what you're working on?
You can find me on GitHub or Twitter under the same handle. It's Daimaki. It's probably easier to see than here. Yeah, that's it. I don't have any personal website. It's mostly just GitHub and Twitter.
All right. Can you spell that handle in the chat, and that way we can make sure it gets into the show notes?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So picks are just things that we shout out about on the show. I'm going to go ahead and shout out about a few things myself, and then I will hand it off to you. The first one is I've started a challenge called 75 Hard, and this is basically, so let me back up. So there's a podcast I listen to called the MFCEO Project. It's done by Andy Frisella. He's based out of St. Louis, runs a supplement company, like a health supplement company. And anyway, he came up with this program, and anyway, it looked like something that I was like, I need to prove, to myself that I can do this. So there are 5 things that you have to do every day. Now I've modified it a little bit just because Sundays for me are, I pretty much dedicate the whole day to worship. So, I do the best I can, but I do not work out on Sunday, and I never have. So one of the things is you have to work out twice a day for at least 45 minutes each. And one of the workouts has to be outside. So if it's raining, you're going to get rained on. If it's hailing, you're going to get hailed on. If you're going, if there's a hurricane outside, don't blow away, right? But you have to do one of them outside. And the other one, you can do at the gym. You have to drink a gallon of water. You have to read 10 pages out of a book. You have to, I'm forgetting 2 of them. One of them is you have to post some form of an update to social media. And you have to stick to your diet. You can't cheat at all. If you cheat at all, then you have to start over. So if you break any of those rules, you have to start over. And it was funny because the things that I was worried about were the diet and the exercise. And so I started it a few days ago. And the thing I messed up on Saturday was that I didn't read 10 pages out of a book, right? So it was something relatively simple. I was like, oh man. So I had to start over. So I started over yesterday, and I did all 5 of them, and all 4 of them, because yesterday was Sunday. But yeah, so it's been crazy. The other thing is that on Friday I found out that I had broken my arm. I fell off of a roof the Friday before, and they did an X-ray, and they told me they couldn't determine if I had broken my arm. Told me to go back after a week after the swelling had gone down. So I did. So yeah, so I'm doing the 75 hard, 2 workouts a day, 45 minutes with a broken arm. So anyway, it's been interesting, and just to see, how far I can push this has been kind of fun. So I'm going to pick that. And then, yeah, the other pick I have, and I know that this has been talked about on the show before, but I'm kind of playing with React Native myself, and I discovered Expo. I can't decide if it's something that I want to use on every project, but it's definitely got some convenient things that go into making the project go. So yeah, so I'm going to pick that.
Expo is amazing.
Yeah,
especially if you start with React Native.
Yep. So do you have some picks? Just anything you want to shout out about, book or TV show that you've been enjoying, technical tools that you've been kind of getting into, anything like that?
Yeah. So I recently enjoyed the Chernobyl show on HBO. It was a very moving story, actually. And I'm pretty. It's actually very popular, or it was at the time of airing. I just watched it last week, and I really recommend everybody to see. It's a bit exaggerated, but it's like the point is making the story a bit more maybe not relatable, like a bit stronger. Other than that, I don't know. React Native 60 is gonna be out this week, so it's probably around Wednesday or Thursday if you're interested. So, if I have another pick, no, but I cannot think of it.
That's okay.
Yes.
So those are pretty good. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you as well for hosting me.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and wrap this up, and we'll be back next week with another React Native Radio.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast